Imagine a horde of warriors on horseback, sweeping across vast plains at unimaginable speeds, striking fear into the hearts of entire nations. These were the Mongols, the most feared force in the world. Now picture this unstoppable army charging straight into Europe, threatening to wipe out entire civilizations. How did Europe, a continent plagued by internal wars and rivalries, stand up to this seemingly invincible threat? Today, we're unraveling the story of how the Europeans fought the Mongols and how they managed to survive what seemed like certain doom. We'll look at tactics, brave moments, and surprising twists of fate that helped shape the course of European history. Stick with me, because by the end, you'll see why this chapter of history is so crucial, and you might just uncover a few surprising facts you've never heard before. In the early 1200s, the Mongol Empire was the largest contiguous empire the world had ever seen. Led by Genghis Khan, they swept across Asia, toppling great empires, razing cities to the ground, and leaving entire populations in ruins. Their army was unlike anything the world had ever seen, highly mobile, disciplined, and terrifyingly efficient in warfare. But what made the Mongols so unstoppable? For one, they were masters of psychological warfare. They understood that fear could win half the battle before an arrow was even shot. Their reputation alone would often lead towns and cities to surrender without a fight. The stories of the Mongols' brutality spread faster than their actual armies. Entire populations slaughtered, cities burned to the ground, and survivors taken as slaves or worse. The key to their military success lay in their mastery of the horse and bow. Mongol warriors could fire arrows with deadly accuracy while riding at full speed. They were incredibly disciplined and flexible in battle, adapting quickly to changing circumstances, using fake retreats to lure enemies into traps. It wasn't just brute strength, it was strategic genius. Now, put yourself in the shoes of a European noble in the 1230s. You've heard about the Mongol conquests in the east, but it still seems distant, almost like a rumor. Surely they won't come this far west. But then you get word. Mongol scouts have been spotted on the borders of your land. Your army is far less disciplined and not used to facing such tactics. You can feel the anxiety mounting. Could Europe really survive this? At the time of the Mongol invasions, Europe was a fractured continent. Unlike today, it wasn't a united entity. Far from it. It was a patchwork of kingdoms, duchies, and empires, each with its own interests, enemies, and problems. France was focused on its rivalry with England. The Holy Roman Empire was in political disarray, and the Byzantine Empire, a key player in Eastern Europe, was crumbling under its own internal struggles. One of the reasons the Mongols were so successful early on was that Europe wasn't prepared to face a common threat. The kingdoms and empires of Europe were far more focused on fighting each other. Internal disputes and border skirmishes were common, and alliances were fragile. In short, Europe was ripe for invasion. But could they put aside their differences to face this looming external threat? Now imagine the panic when news reaches Europe that the Mongols have crushed the Kievan Rus and are moving west. Could Europe's warring factions unite in time to stop this new and terrifying enemy? Or would their internal divisions spell their doom? Europe's first real encounter with the Mongols happened in 1223 at the Battle of the Kalka River, which took place in modern-day Ukraine. The Mongols, under the command of Subutai and Jebe, were conducting raids in the region when a coalition of Russian princes, along with a few Kipchak allies, decided to confront them. The Europeans had numerical superiority, but the Mongols had something far more valuable: tactical brilliance. They lured the European forces into a trap by pretending to retreat, a classic Mongol tactic. As the overconfident European armies chased after them, the Mongols turned and struck, annihilating the coalition forces. The result? A decisive Mongol victory that sent shockwaves throughout Europe. Even though this battle was fought far from the major European centers, it showed just how vulnerable Europe was to Mongol tactics. The princes of Russia were either killed or captured, and the Mongols continued their relentless push into Eastern Europe. The Mongols didn't return to Europe until 1236, but when they did, it was with full force. Under the command of Batu Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson, and Subutai, Europe would face one of its darkest hours. In 1241, the Mongols launched a two-pronged attack on Hungary and Poland. These were not simple raids. The Mongols intended to conquer and incorporate these lands into their empire. Their armies moved with lightning speed, dividing their forces to overwhelm the European defenders. First came the Battle of Legnica in Poland. A coalition of European knights, led by Duke Henry II of Poland, tried to stand stand against the Mongols. But despite their courage, the European forces were no match for the Mongol tactics. The heavily armored knights were slower, less mobile, and unfamiliar with the Mongols' hit-and-run attacks. Duke Henry was killed and his army decimated. Meanwhile, in Hungary, King Bela IV had mustered a large army to defend his kingdom. But at the Battle of Mohi, the Mongols once again outmaneuvered their European adversaries. They used a combination of archery, cavalry, and strategic positioning to trap and destroy the Hungarian forces. King Bela barely escaped with his life. At this point, it seemed that nothing could stop the Mongols from sweeping across the rest of Europe. Poland and Hungary had been crushed. Could the rest of Europe fare any better, or was it only a matter of time before cities like Vienna, Paris, and even Rome fell to the Mongol horde? But then, something strange happened. Just as the Mongols seemed poised to conquer the rest of Europe, they suddenly withdrew. Why? The most commonly accepted reason is the death of the great Khan Ogedei in 1241. Mongol tradition required all commanders to return to Mongolia to participate in the election of a new Khan. Batu Khan, the leader of the Mongol forces in Europe, abandoned his campaign and returned to the Mongol capital. Without their leadership, the Mongol army retreated, leaving Europe to breathe a sigh of relief. But was that the only reason? Some historians argue that Europe's geography, combined with the harsh winter conditions, also played a role in the Mongols' decision to retreat. Europe's dense forests and mountainous terrain were far different from the open steppes the Mongols were used to, making it harder for their cavalry-based armies to operate effectively. Additionally, while the Mongols had won decisive victories, they had also sustained losses, and their supply lines were stretched thin. Was Europe truly saved by the death of a Khan, or had the Mongols met their match in the difficult terrain and fierce resistance of the Europeans? And what if the Mongols had returned with even more reinforcements? How different would Europe look today? While the Mongols never returned to Europe in full force, the fear of their return lingered for decades. European military strategies were forever changed. Castles and fortifications were strengthened, and the importance of mobility in battle became a lesson learned the hard way. The Mongols had shown that cavalry and archery could decimate even the most heavily armored knights. Europe also began to establish more long-term alliances, realizing that a divided continent would always be vulnerable to external threats. The Mongol invasions forced Europe to think beyond local conflicts and rivalries and to prepare for the possibility of a greater, more unified enemy. So, how did the Europeans fight the Mongols? They fought with desperation, courage, and the willingness to adapt. In many ways, Europe was lucky. The sudden death of a Mongol Khan saved them from almost certain destruction. But Europe also learned from these encounters, and those lessons would shape the continent's future for centuries to come. History is full of moments where the fate of entire civilizations hangs by a thread. The Mongol invasions of Europe were one such moment. If things had gone differently, we might be telling a very different story today. Thanks for watching. If you found this video interesting, make sure to check out more content on historical veils. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter of history we uncover together. And as always, there's an article related to this topic on my website. Be sure to check it out for even more details.